many games will the Atlanta Falcons win in 2024? With Kirk Cousins, is it time to rise up? What's going on, Falcons fans? It's Mitch here to give you my record prediction for the Falcons in 2024, diving deep into their schedule, the easy matchups, the tough games, and everything in between. This is an exciting season for Falcons fans, for the NFL in general, of course, and the NFC South, a division that nobody thinks is very good, but could actually send maybe multiple teams to the playoffs this year. So it's pretty interesting, at least to me. We're going to talk about it, each matchup. I think the Falcons have definitely a tough start to their schedule, but they could really begin to gain some steam near the end of the season, which is exciting. Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more NFL record predictions, all 32 teams, including the Bucs, the Panthers, the Saints, the rest of the NFC South, and get in the comments and let me know how many games you think the Falcons will win in 2024. Let's look at the schedule. It begins with the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. And this is definitely one of those like swing games for me. This is one of those games where this could be the difference. I know it's week one, but the difference between the Falcons winning the division, going to the playoffs, getting a wild card, whatever, and doing their thing. Because let's just look at the beginning of the year, right? Like, Atlanta plays the Steelers. Tough team. A team that made the playoffs last year with lackluster quarterback play. It speaks to their coaching. It speaks to their defense. It speaks to the other aspects of their team, right? And it is at home, but Atlanta has a lot of new aspects to their team. They've got new at receiver. They've got new at quarterback, of course. They've got new coaching on offense, defense. They've got new defenders. So, to me, like, the Steelers, they've got more rapport on defense, more rapport probably on offense. Now, they do have Arthur Smith, which I think is really interesting. Like, that's the storyline of this game. Arthur Smith might be the edge in this game in terms of he's going to know the Falcons players. He might not know their new scheme. He might not be able to give Tomlin the inside info on the play calling. But in terms of what Kyle Pitts does well and doesn't do well, what Drake London does well and what he doesn't do well, what the offensive line is good at and weak at, the Falcons might not know that well, right? And Arthur Smith will, and so will he know the defense. So that's a really interesting aspect that I kind of lean towards the Steelers with just the proven entities of Mike Tomlin, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minkah Fitzpatrick, that defense. I also know what I'm going to get to a certain degree from Russell Wilson. Like, he's not great, I know that, but he still can. He's a veteran. He's been around. He's going to be able to pick up the offense relatively quickly. I think they have a very strong offensive line. I think they can run the ball. This is going to be a battle of two teams that can really run the ball, really just power the ball down people's throats, and have a couple playmakers to throw the ball to. But to me, like, the Steelers got the better overall defense. I think they've got the Arthur Smith edge. And in week one, that really matters to me. So I'm just going to go with the team that I trust more at the beginning of the year. I'm not exactly sure what Kirk Cousins is going to look like after the Achilles and all that stuff. So that's just the way I see this game. Like, could Atlanta win this game? They are at home, all that stuff. And Russell Wilson, obviously, I'm not very high on him. So yeah, Cousins, you have the better quarterback if Cousins is playing at his best. But to me, like, the Steelers just have more of a calming nature to them to begin the year. So that's why I'm going to go with Pittsburgh. But again, bringing up the beginning of the schedule, they play Philly and Philly on a Monday night. Cousins has struggled there traditionally. Also, that's just a really hard game. Like, Philly is one of the most stacked teams in football, one of the best teams in the NFC, one of the most talented teams in the NFL. They've got a good quarterback, a great offensive line, a very good defensive line. They do have new coaching, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, but they got great receivers. I mean, that offense is going to give the Falcons defense fits. It's going to be very hard because I don't think they're going to be able to rush the quarterback that well against the Eagles. I don't think they're really going to have answers for the run game as much. And they've got great receivers that can really target the secondary. So that's going to be a really tough game. Like, the Falcons are going to have to play really good offense in order to win that game. And we know that primetime Kirk isn't exactly the best. And then they play Kansas City at home on a Sunday night. So I think Philly is going to win, and then I think Kansas City's going to win. I do. I think Kansas City's going to beat the Falcons. I think it's going to be close. Like, I think it's going to be probably a little bit of a shootout, like one of those fun, unexpected back and forth affairs. And the Falcons could pull this one up and off with, great offense, a great game plan on offense, and the ability to kind of get out early, get at home, the energy of the crowd, maybe a turnover or a sack or two. Like, that could certainly happen, but I just have to trust the Super Bowl champs. I think they've got the superior defense, and I think that Patrick Mahomes is going to have an easy time slicing the Falcons in the back end. Like, I just really do. So I think it could be a high-scoring game, but I'm going to go with Kansas City. So that's where we kind of say, like, the Falcons are going to have a really tough start. It's going to be really hard to even get to 1-2. And honestly, if you're 1-2, I think that is a huge, huge win if you're a Falcons fan. Because you've got 3 teams that made the playoffs last year. You've got the Super Bowl champs. You've got a better Eagles team, a better Steelers team than last year, right? So you're dealing with all that. But then, luckily, you get your division, which calms you down a little bit, and you get them at home. So that should definitely help, right? You should beat the Saints and the Bucs at home. You should. Now, the Bucs and the Saints are not bad teams whatsoever. They both have pretty quality defenses and quarterbacks that are veterans, experienced. They've got multiple weapons, right? With the Saints, Kamara in the backfield. They've got competent tight end play, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed. Tampa's got Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, Cade Otton and Rashad White and Baker. And Tampa, I think, is probably the more secure team. They're the more experienced, championship pedigree team. The Saints are maybe the more high octane, like rather hit or miss team that one day they could be really, really good, but the next day they might not be as good. Kind of depends on what Derek Carr you get. But to me, the Falcons should be able to win both those games at home. They should. So I'm going to go with the Falcons there. But I do think that they're going to lose both the games on the road. I do think that these 3 teams are all very, very close. And they're very similar. So I see them splitting with those 2 teams. I do think that the Falcons are going to have some big games here. I think they're probably going to beat Denver in Denver. I think that they're going to beat let's get back to it. I think they're going to lose to Dallas. I think Dallas has a very good secondary, a great pass rush, and a very good passing game. Now, I do think the Falcons could run the ball effectively and, make it interesting that way by slowing down the Cowboys pass rush in that dome. So that could be a potential upset. But I like Dallas's ability on offense to outpace the Falcons in a shootout type of game with CeeDee Lamb and that offense. The Seahawks, I'm going to get back to that one. The Panthers in general, I think that the Panthers are tricky. So with every team in the NFC South, I think there's a 3-team race, and then there's the Panthers. But the Panthers are a team, they beat the Falcons last year, if I'm not mistaken. Now, that was obviously a Desmond Ridder disaster class, and it was also really rainy. But I think Carolina is a lot better this year. And I think Carolina could upset the Falcons. So I'm going to take Carolina in one of the games, but I do think Atlanta will win the other. So I'm going to say they just split with their division across the board because I do think Carolina's gotten a lot better. Their offensive line, their guard position has gotten a lot stronger. Their run game should be better because of it. Bryce Young in year 2 should be more competent. Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, they did improve their offense mightily. Now their defense is a bit suspect, but I do think that Carolina can knock off the Falcons once. Now, we're going to get back to Seattle. This is where the season becomes really interesting for the Falcons. They have to start winning some games here. So I think they're going to beat the Chargers after the bye week at home. That's a tricky one for the Chargers. They got to go from the west to the south. They've got to play the Falcons in the Dome. And I think Atlanta overall, I think they can really run the ball on the Chargers. And then I don't really see the Chargers' weapons. They don't have great weapons. I think if your strength of a football team is to run the ball and you don't have great receivers and you struggle against the run, I think those are all things that make it a tough matchup against Atlanta. Like Atlanta, they're good at running it. They've got a good offensive line. They can stop the run better than they can stop the pass. And to me, like, yeah, they have Justin Herbert, but I don't feel like they've got great weapons. And in Atlanta, I'm going to lean towards the Falcons there. Because I think even in the passing game, Atlanta can make quite a few plays there. Especially off a bye where they should be gaining steam. Now, I think Atlanta's going to win the Kirk Cousins revenge game in Minnesota. That's going to be a Kirk Cousins homecoming of sorts. I just feel like Minnesota, the reason they're going to lose that game, even though it's in Minnesota, is because the quarterback disadvantage. They're going to have J.J. McCarthy, probably a rookie, against Kirk Cousins. That's a huge disadvantage. Cousins at the Raiders on a Monday night. I think that the Falcons will beat the Giants at home for sure, and I think they'll beat Washington in Washington for sure. So I really like how this last stretch kind of suits up for them. I think this is another swing game against the Raiders. That will not be an easy game in Las Vegas on a Monday night. The Raiders have a kind of a deceptively decent defense. Their defensive line is pretty strong. And their offense, they can really kick your butt up front. And they've got really good receivers. And I would say it depends on the quarterback play for them. So that's kind of one where I could see it going either way. But right now, these are the two games where I kind of see them. I think they're going to win one and lose one. So like if I were to say they would beat Seattle and lose to the Raiders, they would end up being 9-8. Right? If they beat the Raiders and they lose to the Seahawks, they'll still be 9-8. I mean, they could lose both, but it's probably unlikely. I kind of see them around 8-9, 9-8. That's kind of where I see the Falcons, similarly to Tampa Bay, as I discussed earlier. Now, I think Tampa has a harder schedule because Tampa has a first place schedule. So let's say they beat Seattle and they lose to the Raiders. So that would make them 9-8 and the top team in their division. But it is close, man. Like, I think Tampa is just as good as Atlanta. So I think the Saints are a step below those two teams. But, man, it's going to be really competitive in the division. Just to talk about that Seattle game, I think Seattle and Atlanta are kind of fairly similar. Raheem Morris, defensive guy, Mike McDonald, defensive guy. Both are going to be able to elevate their defenses. Both don't have great talent on defense. I think Seattle's defense is slightly better. Where I think Atlanta has the edge is they're at home in their building instead of in Seattle. Seattle has kind of a weaker offensive line, and I don't think it's going to be as good or competent on the road. I also feel Atlanta will be able to control the game thanks to their offensive line and the difference in what they have on their offensive line versus what the Seahawks have on their offensive line, leading to Atlanta to run the ball better than Seattle, leading to better protection, all those things. So I'm going to go with Atlanta at home over Seattle. Two pretty similar, kind of same level teams, but Atlanta is at home. So I've got them at 9-8 according to my official schedule prediction, but I could see 8-9. I don't really see 10-7 here. I think the schedule is too difficult. Maybe 7-10 if things go wrong, but I think it's a very narrow margin for this team. I think they're right in that 7 to 9, maybe 10 win range. That's kind of where the Falcons are at for 2024. You guys let me know where you think the Falcons are at for 2024 in the comment section below. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next record prediction video. Peace.